My name is Andrea. I am 28 years old. The night my father threw my entire life outside, I had just finished a brutal 14-hour shift, crafting tiered wedding cakes. I still smelled like burnt sugar, heavy vanilla extract, and pure exhaustion when I pulled into our driveway. I parked my old car and saw my vintage leather duffel bag, split completely open across the wet grass. My white chef coats were tangled mercilessly around the sharp edges of a shattered ceramic bedside lamp, and a heavy plastic box of my childhood photographs had been dumped upside down, like disposable trash. My father, Marcus, was standing there under the harsh yellow porch light, with his smartphone held up high. He was actually recording me, acting like humiliating his eldest daughter was premium content for his ego. My mother stood silently behind him in the shadows. My younger brother, Julian, laughed loudly, kicking a stack of my framed culinary certificates sliding directly into the street. "You are 28 years old," my father barked, his voice deliberately loud enough for all the neighbors to hear. "You suck the life out of us like a selfish parasite. I want you out of my house tonight." The reason for this sudden, explosive eviction was something my father conveniently left out of his little public broadcast. Earlier that morning, I had finally said no. Julian had wrecked his expensive leased sports car, owing $10,000 to the dealership. My father demanded I drain my personal bakery fund, money I had saved for 5 years to open my own shop, to pay for it. When I refused to pay for Julian's reckless mistakes, my father decided I was no longer a valuable asset. The people living across the street were sitting on their front porch, desperately pretending not to stare at us. But I knew they didn't miss a single second. I looked directly at the camera lens, pointing right at my face, and smiled. Have you ever been called a parasite? By the exact people who were supposed to love you the most? In that exact freezing moment, something deep inside my chest went completely cold and beautifully numb. I silently loaded every last scattered item into the back of my small car, without shedding a single tear. I refused to give them the chaotic scene they desperately wanted. When my trunk was full, I walked slowly up the concrete steps, looked at all three of them, and said very quietly, "I hope you all sleep really well tonight in that house, because I promise you, one day very soon, none of you are going to be able to sleep at all." I parked securely behind a brightly lit 24-hour commercial gas station. I pulled out my phone and listened to the voice memo I had secretly recorded while gathering my ruined things. I heard my father screaming his insults, Julian laughing his cruel laugh, and my mother whispering, "Just let her leave, Marcus. She brought this entirely on herself." I replayed that incredibly toxic audio file exactly 3 times in a row, to memorize it. Families exactly like mine only survive by making you constantly doubt your own memory. By the next morning, they would have called the entire lawn incident a simple misunderstanding. But the digital audio recording did not lie. I spent that first lonely night in a cheap extended stay motel, with one absolute unbreakable rule. I was never going back. Around 1:30 in the morning, my phone lit up with 6 missed calls, then 20 aggressive text messages. My father demanded my exact location. My mother said I was breaking the family's heart. Julian sent a quick message. "Lol. Good luck having fun paying for your own everything from now on." I did not answer a single one of them. I took clear screenshots of every message, created a secure cloud folder, and named it "When They Start Lying." When abusive people humiliate you in public, documentation is the strongest armor you can wear. The next morning, the sun came up, and I called Reina, the brilliant executive sous chef I had worked with for 3 years. She didn't offer useless pity. "Andrea, tell me exactly what happened. Do not protect them," she demanded. I told her every cruel detail. Reina went completely silent, then asked a question that pierced right through me. "If they called you tonight crying, would you go back?" I stared blankly at the ugly motel curtain. "No," I said. "I would rather sleep in my car for a year than walk back through that front door." "Good," Reina said sharply. "Then stop acting like this is a bad breakup that you might eventually fix. This is a burning building that you finally managed to walk out of. Do not run back into the flames." Reina was absolutely right. I had not been evicted from a warm, loving home. I had forcefully escaped a toxic system built entirely on financial exploitation and unearned shame. over a cup of terribly burnt coffee. I suddenly understood something incredibly ugly. They had not kicked me out because I was useless. They kicked me out because I had finally stopped being useful in the exact, submissive way they preferred. By day 3, I had negotiated a decent weekly rate at the rundown motel and taken on 3 extra overnight baking shifts. I had exactly $341 left in my bank account, but instead of panic, I felt weirdly, powerfully clear. The heavy fog of constant familial anxiety was finally lifting. No one was keeping a petty score of my hot showers, or calling me a selfish brat for buying my own premium baking ingredients. At the bakery, the fast-paced chaos finally made perfect sense to me. The kitchen was my true sanctuary. The executive chef, Chef Thomas, closely noticed my intense focus at the end of a grueling 14-hour shift. He pulled me aside and said, "Andrea, you are already doing the complex work of a master pastry chef. Why haven't you applied for the advanced sponsorship program yet?" I had put that certification off for 3 years because my father kept stealing my tuition money. I wiped my flour-covered hands, looked him in the eye, and simply said, "Bad timing." Chef Thomas crossed his arms and replied, "Then maybe it is finally good timing." That afternoon, Reina met me outside a greasy diner and wrote 3 non-negotiable priorities on a legal pad. Housing, certification, boundaries, not defending yourself to your family, not chasing fake emotional closure, she said. Say your father shows up tomorrow crying. Say Julian says the family is falling apart. What exactly do you do, Andrea? I calmly stirred my black coffee and said very clearly, I let it fall apart. We made a solid plan. I officially applied for the Master Certification Sponsorship pathway. I found a small, clean room for rent directly above a quiet, retired mechanic's garage, owned by a sharp-eyed widow named Mrs. Vance. Then, I went into the employee portal at work and changed my emergency contact information from my mother to Reina. It was just one simple tap, but it felt exactly like cutting a bomb wire. Meanwhile, the relentless text messages from my former home drastically shifted their tone. My father completely stopped calling me a lazy parasite and started aggressively asking where the car title paperwork was. My mother suddenly wanted to know if I had accidentally moved the property tax documents. Julian texted me, "Hey, do you have the master login password to the electric utility portal?" There was absolutely no genuine concern for my safety or well-being. There was only pure, unadulterated annoyance at the sudden inconvenience. That was the exact moment I realized my sudden disappearance had not created an ounce of grief in that house. It had created a massive, unmanageable void of unpaid daily labor. I was the one who quietly handled the online bill payments, the heavy grocery pickup orders, and the late-night pharmacy runs. I was the silent, unpaid infrastructure keeping their comfortable lives afloat. Once I clearly saw that undeniable truth, the entire fictional story of my toxic family completely collapsed. If you are listening to this right now, and you have ever had to walk away from a toxic family to protect your own sanity, please hit the like button. Leave a comment down below if you were treated like the unpaid maid and personal ATM of your own household. And please subscribe to the channel if you want more raw stories about taking back your power and rebuilding your life. Your support helps these stories reach the people who are still trapped in the dark. By the end of that first triumphant week, I officially moved into Mrs. Vance's garage apartment. On my very first night, sitting cross-legged on the bare wooden floor surrounded by unpacked boxes, I listened to the actual, breathable silence. Then, my phone violently buzzed. Julian texted, "Dad is massively pissed because you didn't pay Mom's car insurance reminder last week. Now she got hit with a huge late fee. You need to fix this right now." I sat in my safe apartment and laughed out loud. It was deeply, incredibly pathetic. The people who threw my life in the yard were drowning without me. My revenge did not look like screaming back. My revenge looked exactly like total absence. If your family only notices your true value after you completely stop carrying their heavy burdens, were they ever really loving you? Or were they just permanently renting your loyalty for free? Days 6 through 10 were when the real, spectacular, public unraveling of the Brooks family finally began. On day 6, my landlady Mrs. Vance knocked softly on my door with a warm casserole dish. She smiled gently and said, "Honey, your daddy was shouting in his driveway this morning loud enough to wake 3 houses. Men only get that loud when their audience stops clapping. On day 9, I received a text message that proved the entire social dynamic of my hometown had permanently shifted. It was from an old high school friend. People in the neighborhood are really talking. Your dad showed that lawn eviction video to somebody at his accounting firm, acting like it proved a point about tough love. But it completely backfired. Folks think it makes him look incredibly cruel and unhinged. The senior partners are reportedly giving him the cold shoulder. He thought humiliating his daughter would make him look like a strong, no-nonsense parent. Instead, the video made him look exactly like a deranged man who publicly discarded his own child for twisted sport. And the beautiful thing about public cruelty is that sometimes the general public absolutely refuses to side with the cruel person. That exact same night, my cell phone started blowing up with 88 unread messages. "Dad, answer your phone right now," Julian texted. Then came one single text that was completely different from his usual arrogant garbage. "He can't sleep." I didn't feel a single ounce of sorrow. Men exactly like my father always operate under the delusion that harsh consequences only belong to weaker people. But public shame is a very funny, relentless thing. When it finally arrives at the house of a proud, abusive man, it kicks the heavy front door completely off its hinges. 2 days later, my father finally showed up in person, right outside Mrs. Vance's garage apartment. He stood aggressively under the yellow streetlights. He looked significantly worse than I had ever seen. Him frayed at the edges, bloodshot eyes, and locked jaw. "We need to talk right now," he demanded, his voice rough. "We're talking right now," I replied coolly through the narrow gap, keeping the heavy brass chain securely fastened. He glanced aggressively past my shoulder into the small apartment, but he had absolutely zero power inside it. "Your mother's a complete wreck," he said, trying a softer approach that sounded fake. "Julian's failing his classes. This silent treatment has gone on long enough. You know I only filmed you because I wanted you to finally learn how to stand on your own 2 feet." I almost openly admired the absolute audacity of the rewrite. "I am standing on my own feet," I said, my voice like ice. "That is exactly what's bothering you so much, isn't it?" He stepped way too close to the door and lowered his voice into a dangerous hiss. "You're making me look like a damn monster to my partners at the firm. Not I'm genuinely sorry for what, just desperate reputation management." I laughed right in his face. "I'm not making you look like anything, Marcus. You directed your own horror movie when you pressed the record button." His face went dark red with uncontrolled rage. "After absolutely everything we did for you," he shouted loudly. "You mean after absolutely everything I did for you?" I shot back. "Who paid off Julian's car insurance when he crashed? Who managed the contractors, the bills, and the groceries while you went golfing with your friends? Who?" He didn't answer me because he knew I had all the receipts. He tried to quickly reach his hand through the open door gap to grab my wrist, but I stepped back quickly out of his reach. "Leave my property right now," I commanded sharply. "Leave right now, Marcus." Before I play the audio recording of you threatening me for this entire city block to hear, he froze, stared at me like he was looking at a total stranger, then walked stiffly to his dark truck and drove off way too fast. Exactly a week later came the massive public event that tied the entire messy story together. It was the annual City Culinary Arts Festival held in the park near my old neighborhood. Our restaurant sponsored the premium dessert pavilion. Because my advanced master certification application had been officially and enthusiastically accepted, Chef Thomas asked me to run it. I knew my parents and Julian were scheduled to attend a picnic nearby. But I didn't go for closure. I went to claim my space. I wore my pristine, bright white head pastry chef coat with the prestigious logo beautifully embroidered on the chest. I was incredibly good at my job, calm, highly competent, and useful in ways that had absolutely nothing to do with serving my family. Around noon, I saw them. My father was laughing way too loudly with 2 senior partners from his firm, performing normal so hard, it looked physically painful. Then, one of the partners noticed me standing proudly in my head chef uniform under the massive restaurant banner. A wealthy neighbor walked right up to my booth and smiled brightly. "Andrea, I had absolutely no idea you were the head chef at such a prestigious place. Your parents must be incredibly proud." Chef Thomas overheard and loudly answered the question directly for me. "She absolutely is," he boomed. "Andrea is the most talented pastry chef in the city. We are lucky to have her leading the team." His voice was loud enough for anybody standing nearby to hear. When I slowly looked over, my father's fake performative smile was completely wiped off his face. Public humiliation had introduced me to the neighborhood one way, but undeniable professional success was now introducing me in a completely different way. Julian approached my booth first, looking significantly less smug than before. "Everything at the house has been completely insane since you left," he whispered. "Dad yells all the time. Mom keeps crying. I didn't think he would actually push it this far. You laughed and kicked my certificates into the street," I reminded him coldly. His eyes filled with tears instantly. "I know. I'm really sorry." I believed that he finally regretted it. But sudden regret does not magically erase the massive impact of years of abuse. Then, my father finally crossed the grass toward us. There was no big theatrical scene. He knew the wealthy audience surrounding us might not choose his side. He stopped a few feet away, packed with heavy defeat. "You look incredibly busy," he said tightly. "I am," I nodded. He nervously cleared his throat. "People in the neighborhood have been talking a lot," he mumbled. "Yes," I said loudly and clearly. "They tend to do that when they watch a grown man throw his daughter's things on a lawn." My mother visibly winced. Marcus looked like he desperately wanted to argue. But abusive power absolutely hates public witnesses who have already made up their minds. I gave them the absolute only thing I was willing to give them again, the raw truth without any comfort. "I am never coming back to that house," I said evenly. "I am not paying your bills. I am not fixing your messes. What happened to your lives after I finally left is absolutely not something I maliciously did to you. It is just the reality of what was already there when I finally stopped carrying the weight of your incompetence." Nobody argued with me. Julian wiped his wet face with his sleeve. My mother opened her mouth like she wanted to ask for some soft, weak promise that this was only a temporary break, but I spared her the embarrassment. "Maybe one day, years from now, we can sit down and talk," I said coldly. "But it will only be because you finally learned how not to treat me like I am completely disposable." I turned my back on my family and went straight back to work. That was the exact ending they truly deserved. Just me, confidently choosing my own brilliant life right in front of them, while they finally understood they were no longer the center of my universe. Later that evening, when the massive festival was finally ending and the park had started to completely empty out, I stood alone by my car. I unlocked my phone and pulled up the old audio recording from that terrible night on the lawn. I listened to it for exactly 5 seconds, then hit the delete button and wiped it from existence. I didn't delete it because they had somehow earned my mercy. I deleted it because I simply didn't need the heavy proof anymore. The inevitable consequences of their actions had already arrived at their doorstep. Sometimes, walking away is the absolute only way to save yourself, and forcefully make them face exactly what they are without you there to absorb it. If they only ever value the obedient, useful, silent, ATM version of you, then packing your bags and walking away into the dark might be the very first honest, brave thing you ever do in your life. And here is the final question I want to leave echoing in your mind. Long after this video completely fades to black, are you going to be brave enough to finally leave the people who constantly disguise your deep suffering as their version of tough love? Or are you going to keep enduring their abuse in silence? Simply because you are terrified of being called ungrateful by the people breaking you?